Welcome to Restore Executive Life and Leadership Coaching and Consulting Podcast. We are doing the 8 days of transformation, transmutation, meditation, giving instructions on the how of this. This is entitled Northern Lights. Just coming in here, we're following up with something we just started a few moments ago. Don't know exactly when it is that you are listening to it or how you're listening to it, but we're talking about this aspect of E equals MC squared and talking about it from the standpoint of it being possible to create something from the imagination. E equals MC squared. And from algebra, we know that a formula like that can be manipulated. And I was reading something the other day as I constructed the 8 A's, which we have registered for a trademark, and constructed something, and I was talking about it from the standpoint of using it as a consulting framework and a coaching framework and consulting it from that particular standpoint. And the 8 steps, the 8 A's, of course, are awareness. The second one is acceptance. The third one is assurance. The fourth one is adoration. The fifth one is association. The sixth one is assignment. The seventh one is accountability. And the eighth one is assimilation. The unique thing about the 8 A's is that you begin with the end in mind. You begin with the end in mind. You begin with the end in mind. And what that means is that you begin on a physical level. You begin on a physical level with the end in mind. You begin really on the spiritual level. You begin the physical level only after you have completed a journey on the spiritual level. And that's what really everybody does. That's what I was reading this particular item, is that it was talking about that when you're working with, say, an architect, the architect initially dreams, if you will, or imagines, if you will, whatever the building that they are going to be building, they imagine it first. Then they draw out a sketch of it, or they do a schematic of it, or whatever, and they have the entire item completed before a hammer is used, or before a screwdriver is used, or whatever it may be. They have it all drawn out. It didn't even exist before, but they have it all drawn out. And then I was reading this particular item, and it was talking about a civil engineer. And they begin the same kind of way. They go to a ravine or a valley, or, I just saw where they have this invisible bridge between two mountain peaks in Vietnam, I think it was. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? But they went to that place and they saw, when there was nothing there, they saw an invisible bridge. It wasn't there. But then they saw it, and then they began to measure and everything and calculate and everything. And after a while, they sketched it. And when they had it all measured out according to certain laws, they then began to build it. And so people think it's strange when it comes to the matters of spirit, as if spirit, God, universal intelligence, infinite knowledge, all powerful, that when God is working in the spiritual realm with the same kind of individuals who are creative when it comes to the other dimensions of life, because those people who do those kinds of things, those are creative people as well. They got to be creative. They got to be the same kind of people. God, same one that helps people to create music and to do art, all of those kinds of things, each one using their particular talents, just like you. One mind common to all individual persons. That's what we want you to do. Think better of yourself. Think better of yourself. One mind. And so that's what we're talking about in regard to this. That's exactly what we're talking about. But this is what we're talking about here. And it begins with desire. I had mentioned this previously. Our first D got 8 A's, then we got desire. And the first D is this aspect of desire. And then to become definite, that's what I meant by the individuals writing it down and sketching it out. After they've measured and everything like that, they come up with these archetypal ideas. And they talk about what could be. And they may write, I don't know how many sketches of it, and they draw it out. And they may have models of what has been done before or how far it has gone before. And they look at it and say, well, that worked, that didn't work. And they may pull it from various places and say, they did this over here, they did that over there, they had that, and it worked only so far. And so that's the thing about Thomas Thorwood. Thomas Thorwood said about people who were initially learning how to, say, float ships. They didn't study the science of sinking. They studied the science of floating. And so they paid attention when they did not see where iron could float. It sunk. So they studied what did float, and they learned the whole aspect of what did float, and they studied that. Now, this is amazing. This is amazing. This is 2022. And they studied that. And they learned from what they studied that there was this theory, this law that is called displacement. And I read news and all that kind of stuff, and I just saw somewhere where there's this woman that's in charge of a naval vehicle. I'll just leave it at that. And she's in charge of a naval vehicle. And this naval vehicle has all kinds of power. And it says that it has a certain level of displacement. And there's a theory about displacement. And that has to do with something floating. So they study the theory of displacement. I don't know what that theory is. I don't know how it works. I never studied that. But it's an affirmative that something about the amount of water that's displaced makes it possible for something to float. So we got desire, and then you get definite. And then it's something that will fit in with the rest of the universe. It won't hurt it. Others won't do something. It fits in so that what you're doing is for the ultimate good of the rest of humanity. Ultimate good of the rest of humanity. Or God, or spirit, or however you want to do that. There's got to be equilibrium here. The give and take of humanity. Not for an individual, but for the overall species called humanity. It seems that when it comes to humans and really the rest of the species on the earth, that the individual is less important than the overall species. The individual is less important. They used to say about the spaceship Enterprise, to save the Enterprise. Humanity is the Enterprise. And so the overall, that's why the idea of genocide is so terrible. So what we're talking about is this aspect of we had ended on the law of attraction, that when it's conceived in the mind, that the idea is conceived in the mind based on the desire, it then begins to attract to itself this whole aspect of what it needs to be brought forth, this desire that you have, this creative power, begins to attract to itself what it needs in order to manifest. The seed already has within it that which will help it to become the root and then to bring forth the fruits. So what does it need? It needs air, it needs water, and it needs to draw the air into itself from above and the water into itself pretty much also from above, but also from the ground. And so it has to bring that to itself, attract that to itself. And that's the energy. E=mc squared. It's got to bring that. And it begins to attract that by the vibrations within itself. The pole, it drinks in, but then it loses, and drinks in, and then it loses. It drinks in, and then it loses. I hope you understand what I mean when I say that. It drinks in, then it loses. It drinks in, uses what it needs, and then it loses. It drinks in, and then it loses. It gives and it takes. 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 It inhales and then it exhales. It inhales and then it exhales. It consumes and then it exhales. Same thing in regard to the human. So there's that whole thing, and that vibration is called feelings and emotions and all of that. This is the creative process that's taking place. And Thomas Thorwood was writing about all of this. And he also mentioned the whole aspect of affirmations and denials. All of this is inside of my item that I told you I can send you a copy of it. It talks about affirmations. And Thomas Thorwood also had 8 A's. Now, I had developed my 8 A's before I was exposed to Thomas Thorwood 8 A's, but a lot of people have 8 A's. They have 8 A's in the creation cycle. There are 7 steps, and then the 8A is the next day. And so God was able to incorporate all of that. Thomas Thorwood talks about the octave, and that's the beginning of the next 8A. My 8 A's go from alpha to omega. Thomas Thorwood talks about that, alpha and omega, and that whole piece in regard to that. And so, again, it's a meditative piece that we work with in regard to individuals. They go through a number of cycles, and God has made the human in God's own image, which means the human creates in the same kind of way that God creates. God creates. The text says, "It is done unto you as you believe." It is done unto you as you believe. Done unto you as you believe. It is done when you believe. Alpha is completed. That's why you begin with the end in mind. Before you have started physically, it must be done mentally, spiritually. It is already done in that spiritual realm. It's very, very vital that that concept is anchored in you. It's very vital that that concept be anchored in you. And that's what meditation is about. That's what the whole aspect of journaling is about, so that one is paying attention to one's thoughts, one's emotions, feelings. That's what study is about, all of those things. And so if a person begins to understand that one is not a prisoner, no matter where you may be confined, you're not a prisoner. And precedent is not a predictor of the future necessarily. No matter where you are, principle can be that which tells you what the future is going to be. You're not captive by your past, no matter what your past has been. Your future is not predicated upon your past, no matter who you are. And so this individual that is writing this article talks about possible futures. Possible futures. You've got options. Or, as I've said, Neville said, imagination creates reality. This article, Martin E.P. Seligman, Seligman, Peter Relton, Ailton. Roy F. Womeister is last name spelled B as in Bravo, Aumeister. And then Chandra Sripada, Sripada. All of those are doctors, from what I understand, if I haven't read it that closely like that. But they are talking about navigating into the future or driven by the past. You got a choice. You got a choice. And based on what I just said, they are talking about this idea of prospection. You looking at your future and determining if it's the future that you want. And they are writing. And they got one section of this. It says, remembering the past and imagining the future. Remembering the past and imagining the future. So, as I said, coaching is not dealing with individuals who are consider themselves to be sick. They consider themselves to be going somewhere, and they may be temporarily stalled wherever they are. They're not sick. They are working with something from the standpoint of they want to get somewhere. They're like a team. They may have a little short detour, but they want to get somewhere. And then one of the things that is working with that is this whole idea of meditation. And this is another one of the very interesting things when I speak of journaling and stuff like that. Meditation is top of the line as far as I am concerned when it comes to stepping into what we call the silence. It is a practice. It's one of the practices. There are 7 life structures that we talk with that anchor this entire system that we have. Meditation is one of the highest ones. And what we talk about is the aspect. Now, for me, again, there are basic things in regard to this. I've been practicing a level of meditation for a while. And again, you start and you learn and you start again and you learn some more. And so for individuals, we have this pamphlet that is called Discover the Power of Meditation. Discover the Power of Meditation. And you can get it. It's available to you as a download, or we can email it to you. It's Discover the Power of Meditation, of mindful meditation. Mindful, that's what it's called. This is different from what I'm talking about, the item that I was talking about there. This is like a beginner's guide, if that's where you are. And it's a beginner's guide to meditation. So it's something that works for a person who is beginning to meditate. So this is different from the item that I was initially talking about, which is a much smaller item. It's got about, I don't know, there large spaces, pictures, all of those kind of things that are in between. And then there's another one called the Case for Mindfulness, which is about the same number of pages and everything like that. The Case for Mindfulness just gives you some things that will help you to just get started with meditation, or mindfulness as it's called. And then another item is a research, research book, a book that's done on research. It's called Mindfulness and Psychotherapy. It's edited by Christopher K. Germer. I'm spelling that last name Germer. Ronald D. Siegel, Siegel. Paul R. Fulton, and it was done by the Guildford Press. And so it's called Mindfulness and Psychotherapy. And so these items, I have them in a PDF form. It's possible that they can be gotten via Amazon, other places like that. I got them as a result, of course, when I'm in school, and they were part of my reading and things like that, part of my empowerment that was done for me by my teachers. And so they supplied me with various things according to my desire and my hunger, and what they had. So they shared with me these particular resources, and I get to share them with you because I was in that particular school. And I had mentioned to you previously the aspect of the American Psychologist, a journal of the American Psychological Association, January 2022, volume 77. This is number one. His ISSN 0003-066X. And inside of that item, there was this discussion about religion, spiritual, and religious competencies in psychology. The writer of that particular item was a lady, a doctor. Her name is Cassandra Vieten, 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 V is in victory. And then a Dr. David Lukoff is, if I'm saying that correctly, in any name that I'm saying incorrectly, please forgive me. Send me an audio, if you will, so that I can do it better next time. But his last name is spelled L as in Lincoln, U as in Utah, K as in Catherine, O as in Oscar, F as in Frank, F as in Frank. That's the spelling of his name. But spiritual and religious competencies in psychology is the name of the article that is from her and him. And I had mentioned that I had a previous article in which she was also a co-author of that article. And it also dealt with the aspect of meditation as well. It takes a different approach in regard to that particular item as far as meditation is concerned. It looks at some things that the people may or may not have a particular approach to what they're looking at. But the article itself, this article I downloaded a little bit ago from the internet. It is entitled Future Directions in Meditation Research, Recommendations for Expanding the Field of Contemplative Science. This article I downloaded from the web. It says the journals.plos. So is the place that I get that. I'm not sure what that PLOS. I have seen it before. Forgive me for not knowing exactly what it is, but I do know that it is a journal, and what we call, like, I believe it is a peer-reviewed journal. It's a journal for research, but the article itself is called Future Direction in Meditation Research and Recommendations for Expanding the Field of Contemplative Science. And she is her name is the first one named. There are others that I have seen in regard to this, Michael Sapiro. I've seen that name previously as well, in regard to this particular field as well. But she says the abstract said the science of meditation has grown tremendously in the last 2 decades. Most studies have focused on evaluating the clinical effectiveness of mindfulness-based interventions, neural and other physiological correlatives of meditation, and individual cognitive and emotional aspects of meditations. Far less research has been conducted on more challenging domains to measure, such as group and relational, transpersonal and mystical, and difficult aspects of meditation. And so it goes on in regard to that. So it's talking about future research in regard to that. And so these are the things that I've read that has her name on it. And from what I can see, she's a very um, uh, a great scholar from what I can see in this particular area. And so her research papers, because again, why am I saying research when we're doing what some people consider to be a spiritual base, a religious base, whatever you want to call that? Because I believe God is a great scientist. I want you to get that. That the natural laws and the spiritual laws, because there's one God, he does not divest himself of being spirit when he deals with science. One of the great, I think it's Descartes, that felt that the universe was a had mathematical laws. He felt that he heard the music and that the spheres, as he called them, he thought it was mathematical music itself, and understood that the playing of chords on different instruments, string instruments, if you will, that the length of the chord determined the sound that one would hear. It was a mathematical equation. And so people, when they are working with this, and I'm one of those individuals that when I look at it, I think that God understands math. I think the universe has a mathematical equation to it in a certain kind of way as well. That God is both conscious and subconscious, and that right brain, left brain, whatever you want to call it, I think God is all in all. That's my approach to this. And so that's why I'm involved with this, is that God makes sense to me. To me. I think he understands colors and everything like that. Man knows when it's right. And so I think God is big enough to guide you, to direct you, no matter which avenue that you may take. And so that's what I'm inviting you to do, is to take an avenue, to trust Spirit in your own way, and that the structure of the 8 A's allows you to do that. There are other structures. No, this is not, the only one in the world. I wouldn't say that at all. I wouldn't, if somebody said that to me, I wouldn't believe it. You have to resonate with what resonates with you from the inside out. And so that's what we're talking about in regard to this whole aspect. It's got to be right for you, and right for you every day. It's got to be right for you. But we have, a host of resources that are meant to help a person to trust every day that God is working in one's behalf. And like the father Job in the Bible, Job, one of the older individuals, if not the oldest individual that's mentioned in the Bible. Job, he had gone through and lived life and had acquired really a fortune and then lost it, lost all his children. And then people came around and they told him that his friends really came around and said, it's all your fault. It's all your fault. And they tried to convict him to convict himself. And Job kept defending himself over and over again. You know how it is. You defend yourself, you defend yourself, you defend yourself. And one person asked him, says, really, are you trying to say God is at fault? That's what's going on here? And then God showed up and said, Job, are you accusing me? And Job had to think about that. And God kept going. And God asked Job a few questions, as if, because Job was basically saying, it seems like I know everything. I got to answer for everything. And God asked him a question, says, where were you when I laid the foundation of the world? When your life falls apart and you think everybody else, they keep telling you, well, you're the reason, but you can't find any reason within yourself. So you don't understand it. Like I said, when my friend Ronald Berry died, I couldn't find any reason why that should be. Made no sense when my sister died. Couldn't find any reason for that. Neither then nor now, in both cases. When I'm in the room when my great-grandmother dies, couldn't find any reason for that. I was 5 years old. Made no sense then nor now. God says, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? I don't remember that. So where were you when the morning stars sang together? Did you have your 8 A's then? No. I don't remember that. God was saying to Job, I have my own structure. Your 8 days can correspond to that, like the 7 days of the week, and then the beginning of the next day it correspond to that. The order of creation can correspond to that, so that you can have some order. And that's what I say to people. It can correspond to that. It can get you so far, maybe farther than where you are right now. And it's worked for me because I got it from God. admin@realcoach.com. And we want to help as many people as possible because I look around and I have in mind that in America, even in the city that I live in and other places, that things can be better. And we've helped a lot of people. And yes, there is, for those who are able, there is things that they return as far as tithes, offerings, gifts, all kinds of stuff. There are those that we've helped and benefit that didn't return anything. We work with people. That's what we do. They make a commitment that they are going to grow. We make a commitment to grow as well, and are still growing. In both cases, we all win because there's no force, there's no make you, there's none of that. None of that whatsoever. At any step along the way, a person remains free. At every step along the way, a person remains free. Every step along the way. To be him or herself. To be who God has called them to be. I will tell you that the journey is challenging with God. You can't read the Bible or probably any spiritual book and not think that the journey is what we call easy. But you can know that Spirit will always, always, always be with you. Because God said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. And that's true for every day of your life, whether it's past, present, or future. The wake up is that you realize that it's been true all along. No matter how many tears you may have cried, no matter how many times you feel like you've died, God has been there all the time. He never left. Or she never left, if you want to say that. You've never been alone. God wants you now to travel with God consciously. You can go farther. You can be more. You can do more. Because now your eyes will be open. You'll know where you are. Because you'll know who you are and whose you are. You'll be God expressing God's self in this world, knowing that when you imagine it on the inside, you create it, so to speak, on the outside, because you are God. And Jesus Christ said, of myself I can do nothing. But with God working in, through, and as me, I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. Or as we say, imagining creates reality. Namaste.